to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star.
That's a rousing beginning. Thanks, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo, where in a world filled with hatred and violence and intolerance, we do our best to place love at the center of all we do. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whoever you love, whatever you believe, whether you have been here for many years or have come through our doors for the very first time today, you are welcome here. Whether if you're watching on YouTube, we're glad you're out there. You are all welcome here just as you are. Our community is richer and more complete because you are here. My name is Fran Manley, and I'm this morning's worship associate. I'm pleased to be sharing the pulpit this morning with Ted Lightfoot. Ted's a fairly new member of our congregation, but a long-time and deeply committed Unitarian Universalist who will be sharing some of his hard-won, long-time wisdom with us in the sermon. We're all blessed to be worshiping in this beautiful space, which rests on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people, original nations of this land, who continue to call for justice and self-determination. As always, let's take a moment to thank the many people who make a service like this possible. The ushers who greet you at the doors, the musicians who enrich our service, the tech team who manage the sound and images here, and who send our services out into the world on YouTube, the food ministry who turn a simple coffee hour into a feast, and many other people who do many other things without whom we would not be able to gather on Sunday morning. Reminder to parents that our religious education program is on break until August, but the nursery is open for children under age 3, through age 3. Through age 3, Jen? Jess? Yeah. Meanwhile, children are always welcome to be with us here in the sanctuary. And if you like, it's of course fine to bring a book or quiet toys to help them keep occupied during the service. And since there aren't a lot of announcements this morning, I'm going to make a public service announcement on behalf of name tags. How many of you have your name tags on this morning? Pretty good. pretty good. I would like to suggest that if you have a name tag, it would be really, really helpful to many other people if you would wear it on Sunday morning, because some people like me are old, and even some people are young, and we meet you, and then the next week we know we met you, but what was his name again? What was her name again? And that can even apply to somebody who's been around for a really long time. So if you have a name tag, it is a service to everybody else if you would wear it. And if you don't have one, you can sign up at the welcome table, the new member table, to get a paper one that goes into a plastic cover. Or if you want to see Josh Disick back there, he offered these name tags as part of the auction for $5 each, and he's still willing to make more. So see him if you would like to have one of these, find out how to go about doing that. You will find a few important announcements on the back page of your order of service, so please take a few moments to check those out. And now let's take a moment to deepen our connections with old friends and create connections with new ones by greeting our neighbors. And if you prefer to sit quietly in your seat and just listen, it's always fine to do that too. Hello, Ted. Nice to see you. What comes up? Yeah, we ring that bell. And it helps. It doesn't hurt to hold it up close to the mic. It makes really loud. So we give them a minute or two.
Good suggestion, thank you. Thank you, that's a good suggestion. If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bonds of peace. Come, let us worship.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we say together our words for lighting our chalice. We gather in loving community, inspiring one another to transform ourselves to create a more just and compassionate world. And I invite you to remain standing and pull out the insert that you found in your order of service, turning to number 13, 100 Years Hence. This is an old Universalist hymn. The words were written, as you can see on here, in 1852. You know the world that we live in now, so you can decide for yourself how prophetic they were a little over 100 years ago.
100 years hence, what a change will be made in politics, morals, religion, and trade, in statesmen who wrangle or ride on the fence. These things will be altered 100 years hence. Our laws then will be on compulsory rules, our prisons converted to national schools. The pleasure of sinning, 'tis all a pretense, and people will find that 100 years hence. All cheating and fraud will be laid on the shelf. Men will not get drunk nor be bound up in self, but all live together, good neighbors and friends, as Christian folks ought to 100 years hence. All cheating, man's partner, man's equal shall stand, while beauty and harmony govern the land. To think for oneself will be no offense. The world will be thinking 100 years hence. Oppression and war will be heard of no more, nor blood of a slave leave a stain on a shore. Conventions will then be a useless expense, for we'll go free suffrage 100 years hence. Instead of speech making to satisfy wrong, we'll all join the chorus to sing freedom's song. And if the millennium is not a pretense, we'll all be good neighbors 100 years hence.
It's okay to laugh. Maybe we should give it another 100 years? Excuse me. I invite you now to turn together in your, well, I think it's going to be up here, but it'll also be in your hymnal number 597, Love versus Hate, a responsive reading. Your part is the part in the bold letters. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. Victory breeds hatred. They who give up all thought of victory or defeat, let us overcome violence by gentleness. Let us overcome the miserly by liberality. Each week, we take a good portion of our Sunday offering and give it away to a social justice cause outside our church walls. This month, we're supporting the good work of Grassroots Gardens of New York. Grassroots Gardens' mission is to share knowledge, power, and resources to grow healthy food, heal systemic harm, and strengthen neighborhood connections through community gardens. You can find more information about them, including how you can be involved, on our website, buffalouu.org, and at grassrootsgarden.org. Whether you make your offering in the collection plate, online, through the church website, by mail, or by setting up an automatic donation through your bank, Your generosity is what enables our church to live into its mission to inspire us to transform ourselves to create a more just and compassionate world.
May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance, let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with sailing birds. And let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, fill the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. And let it be a dance, let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance, everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. Time for joy, time to cry. So take it as it passes by, and let it be a dance, let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance, the morning star comes out at night. Without the dark, there could be no light. And if nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. So let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Let the sun shine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. Round and round we go again. So let it be a dance, let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance once more for the mountains. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance we do. Kid concert over. Thank you. Thank you.
And I should probably give special thanks to Jesse Downs for humoring me in this, having recorded music, not live music in a service. Rick was an old friend of mine, and Rick was not happy with how the Hymn Book Commission changed his song into a hymn. I thought everybody should hear Rick's version once. I told Michael before the service that when he heard it, trust me, he would realize why they had to fix it. I think Rick knew that there had to be an actual melody to the verse. But the one thing I think Rick never completely got over was their changing the words ever so slightly. The original words were share the laughter, bear the pain, B-A-R-E, not bear the pain as in suffer in silence. And as Rick wrote it, that song would be, I thought, the perfect introduction to the pastoral prayer, where we each take a moment to reflect on those things in our lives that have filled us with joy, with laughter, and sadness. So I would encourage you in the next few moments to say a word or two to express any joys that you have, any sorrows and any pains. And given the topic of this sermon, I'm going to suggest that you can expand that from just people to any person, place, or thing that bothers you. You're welcome to share with the congregation. Each joy, a miracle, each pain, a prayer. And may the congregation say, Amen. I cannot stand at this pulpit without thinking about Dan Budd. A lot of you knew Dan as your minister. I knew him through the district board. For those who didn't know Dan, he was, I would say, the ultimate Unitarian minister. He was erudite, cultured, often scholarly. And while this sermon is about universalism, the longer title was, "From the Depths of Depravity Sprang the Seeds of Hope." And I don't think there's any way to deal with depravity except in a somewhat analytical sense. And so for the first part of this sermon, I'm going to channel Dan and his ability to talk about things in a dispassionate manner. The basic idea of universalism, essentially universal salvation, is not new. It was originally proposed in the 3rd century by someone aptly named Origen, although spelled with an E for the second I. But universalism didn't become a significant religious movement until the 18th century. So the question I want to address today is what had to happen in that 1,500 years in between before the idea finally took root? And to answer that question, we have to go back to a period of history that is so bleak they don't teach it in high school. As feudalism died out, central monarchies grew and became more powerful. The 16th century saw the colonization of the Americas and the Protestant Reformation in Europe. This led to a series of religious wars, the most infamous of which is the 30 Years' War, which killed as many as 8 million people through a combination of battle, famine, and particularly famine caused by besieging cities, and of course, the Black Death. Parts of Germany lost over half their population. The sieges were so protracted that people were forced to turn to cannibalism. Like I said, a bleak period in history. There were highlights in the 17th century. That's when opera was invented. But it was also the heyday of the Inquisition, and it was the peak incident of a magical thinking trend called medical cannibalism, in which one ate, say, a healthy liver in order to cure one's own liver. Bleak. But perhaps the most damning description of European culture at that time were the observation of the indigenous Canadians who encountered French colonists. In their book, The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity, Graeber and Wengrow give a detailed account of those interactions. The Canadians noted the Europeans were always fighting amongst themselves. They were thieves and deceivers. They kept galley slaves. And of course, they were drunks. But the Europeans were equally scandalized by the Canadians. They described them as, a quote, the Indians imagined they ought to, by right of birth, enjoy the liberty of wild-ass cults, rendering no homage whatsoever to whomsoever, except when they like. The Europeans obeyed their captains out of fear. The Europeans mocked the Canadians because they only obeyed their captains in so much as they could convince them in discourse. The Canadians had no laws or punishments for people who offended, but the family of the offender or the perpetrator had to make amends to the victim. But what scandalized the Jesuits the most was the equality of the sexes. Women were given complete autonomy over their own bodies. They had the choice of sexual partners either before or after marriage, and the freedom to divorce someone who they didn't like. If we look for a world described by the hymn 100 Years Hence, I find it sobering to think that you might find a culture that was closer to those ideals 200 years before rather than 150 years after those words were written. So clearly, 17th century Europe was not fertile ground for universalism. That would not occur until after the Enlightenment. We've all been told that the Enlightenment is the work of European freethinkers. But one of the salient points made by Graeber and Wengrow is about the role of a particularly articulate Wendat sage named Candiaronk, who both wrote and lectured about the liberty of the Iroquoian people when he visited France. And he discussed this with many of the fathers of the Enlightenment when he was there. As detailed in that book, it is undeniable that the freedom of the Iroquoian people had a huge impact on the Enlightenment. The belief that ordinary people can choose their religion and be afforded a voice in it seems to me to be a direct gift from the Iroquoian cultures to us. Now, you may wonder who the Wendat are and what happened to them. They, like the Haudenosaunee, were a confederation of Iroquoian nations. There were lots of Iroquoian nations, not just 6. The Wendat, also called the Wyandot, allied themselves with the French. The Haudenosaunee allied themselves with the British. The British then armed the Haudenosaunee with European weapons that they used to annihilate the unaligned regions such as the Wenro people who inhabited western New York in the genocidal Beaver Wars of 1638 to 1643. And then they drove the Wendat west. Their descendants now live in Oklahoma. So it seems that even civilized people can be taught to fight amongst themselves. Fran?
Words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. All men, today we'd say all people, all men, great minds, philosophers, and literary geniuses throughout the ages have pointed out, and we find ourselves having to agree with them, that there is something wrong in human nature. There is something in all of us that makes us more than one self. We're all two selves. And if you look at yourself hard enough, you will find that other self. We find ourselves split up against ourselves. We have something of what the psychologists or psychiatrists would refer to as the schizophrenic personality. We are split personalities. There's something high in us, and there's something low in us. There is something in all of us which causes us to cry out with Ovid, the Latin poet, "I see and approve the better things in life, but the evil things I do."
So now we turn to the flowering of Universalism, and while there are much more cultured threads, the elevator speech on Universalism that was started by New England whalers, so I thought my little harpoon here might make a better visual cue for turning you from the bleak, bleak past to a truly brutal profession. Whaling was neither a pleasant nor a safe occupation. The gist of it was you got down on a little rowboat in the open ocean and went chasing after trying to kill whales who would occasionally fight back. They say whaling ships smelled so bad that even on the open ocean, you could smell a whaler before you could see it. They also say that whalers who fell out of the boat were left to drown or to the sharks. A brutal profession. Not surprisingly, the crews were comprised of the underclass of society, including many blacks and Native Americans. Statistically, 20% of whalers were Pacific Islanders, mostly Hawaiians, where cannibalism was not practiced, but the whalers were certainly familiar with the cannibal Isles, now called Fiji, and the New Zealand Maori, who were definitely cannibals. So how did people consigned to such a brutal life convert to a theology so progressive that had hymns like 100 years hence? They were forced to confront human failings and brutality, also diversity. Universalism taught that we were not defined by our sins or lack thereof. We were all children of God, and no matter what path we had taken through life, no loving God would forsake his children, even the cannibals. Now, cannibals are an extreme example, I know that, but they mark the well-known bound of the experience of the whalers. And I think it's important to realize that they drew their bounds widely enough that even the cannibals were included. They couldn't hide from people unlike themselves. Their lives depended on working and trusting with them. And through committing themselves to this brutal world, through accepting those with radically different ethics, they found hope. They found the hope of universal salvation. The early Universalists turned Ovid around. They made peace with and participated in many ugly things in this life, but found hope for their own salvation and hope for the cannibals through accepting human failings. That, and well, maybe they talked to some of the Native Americans.
On January 8, 1973, 5 dependents pled guilty to the Watergate break-in. 12 days later, Richard Nixon was inaugurated for his second term. 4 months later, the Senate Watergate Committee began its investigation. And on January 14th of that year, Paul Carnes, then minister of this church and later to be president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, wrote this: "We must set our hearts against disenchantment. Perhaps we should remember that our forefathers were suspicious and cynical about the beneficent power of government. That's why they tried to balance the powers and protect us from ourselves with the Constitution. The future will still belong not to those who bring the wrath of God, but to those who appear as harbingers of hope."
Well, I might as well name the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. Paul Carnes had faith in the Constitution to keep his spirits up through Watergate, but today the Constitution itself is under threat. We can go to protests. I think the No Kings protest took press away from his birthday party, and I think that one registered. But Donald Trump loves making liberals squeal. I'm not sure he doesn't get more of a kick out of our protests than we do. Hoping to change Donald Trump into a normal president is the very definition of an impossible dream. I kind of envision Joe Darian and Mitch Lee working on and Joe saying, "Oh, how about this? To dream the impossible dream, to quench Donald Trump's thirst for power." And Mitch turning to and saying, "You know, Joe, I think that's a little too far-fetched." But Mitch Lee did have one final dream that we might be able to make true. And we might be able to make it come true sooner rather than later. And I'm quoting from his obituary. "I think if you see that no one is going to laugh at you for it, I think the concept of living nicely will be infectious. I believe there's room for the absence of cynicism. This is my final dream before I take the last cab." And that really is the thesis sentence for this sermon. If we can't fix Donald Trump, maybe we can find hope by being nice. Can we be nice to people who are MAGA, the way the old Universalists were nice to the cannibals? Now, I know some of you are thinking, cannibals, maybe, MAGA, that's asking a lot. There are some obvious similarities, of course, between the cannibals and MAGA. I mean, first of all, they both get very excited when somebody jumps up and says, "Eat the rich!" And I apologize, but I figured I needed at least one dad joke to sort of lighten things up after where this started. But the Universalist whalers were forced to work with at least the odd cannibal. My professional life is full of Republicans. Some hardcore MAGA, most not. And we also have some MAGA neighbors, including some very good neighbors who helped plan Rin's baby shower. And I make a point of talking to them to understand where they're coming from and to share some of where I'm coming from, too. But I always start with a point of agreement. What? A point of agreement with Donald Trump? Now, if I were to ask you, just off the cuff, name 3 areas where you agree with Donald Trump, I would be lucky, I repeat, lucky to get a blank stare. Yeah. But I had time to think about this sermon, and in an eerie way, I found I agree with many of the things Trump said, many of his 10-word campaign promises. Certainly not all of his promises. I would never agreed with the ones on racism or being autocratic or homophobia. There were a lot of them that left me pretty cold. But as I looked at it, I came to appreciate that the man has a gift for 10-word campaign promises expressed in language appropriate for either a 5th or 6th grader that identify issues that are important to a lot of people, including me. I think one of the big differences between, say, me and a MAGA is that the MAGAs tend to believe his promises. I tend not to. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to identify any Trump policies that I agree with. But you look at those promises. Who doesn't want to stop the war in Ukraine? How long was that going to take? But my point is that the people who voted for Trump found things, positive things, that they could identify with and trust that he would do. One place I agree, well, almost strongly, with Mr. Trump is bringing manufacturing back to the United States. I don't think tariffs are going to do that. The New York Times says that we'd do better to repeal his 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which provided huge tax incentives for offshoring manufacturing. But I, as a consultant, work with people in manufacturing, and when I talk to my clients, nobody talks about tax policy. Right now, there are 7.5 million unfilled jobs in this country. 400,000 of those jobs are for factory workers. There are, and I should probably double check this, but I've seen the number repeated, 186,000 jobs open in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry, 96,000 of which require a PhD. Now, presidents cannot create new PhDs in the first 100 days in office. But when I talk to people in manufacturing and I say, the root cause is that salaries in manufacturing are just not high enough for people to go into it, it's amazing how people will agree with me of all across the political spectrum. But the point is, these are not some MAGA zealots that I met in the street. These are people I know on a first-name basis. If I talk politics to a Republican, and I tell someone who voted for a 10-word campaign promise that they've been duped, it usually plays out like the time at GA when I suggested to a very well-meaning UU volunteer that my pizza box with mozzarella melted all over it was not recyclable. She got very defensive and said, regulations are different in different places, and put it in the recycling. Apparently in Maryland, mozzarella is recyclable. Who knew? But when I talk to people like MAGA people or her, whenever you try to shame people, whenever you do something that embarrasses them, they're going to react that same way. So I don't really recommend that you start debating MAGA folks that you meet in the street. But I do recommend being nice. Give up shaming, blaming, cynicism, and guilt. I also want to remind people that in the last election, 34% of the people who voted identified as Republican. 32% of the people who voted identified as Democratic. 34% of the people who voted identified as independent. And when you talk to independents about how our political discourse is going right now, the most common image I hear, at least amongst men of my advanced age who grew up on Mad Magazine, is watching the Democrats and the Republicans is like reading Spy versus Spy. But that doesn't seem to sway many independents. So I'm going to propose that if you want to give up blaming and guilt, that you start with something easier than MAGA. Can you forgive those who had ancestors who lived through brutal times? Our land acknowledgement acknowledges our culture and how we took the land from the Haudenosaunee. But the Sullivan campaign is, the UN Human Rights Commission calls it ethnic cleansing. But it doesn't address how the Haudenosaunee got the land. They didn't let the Wenro people leave. They honestly killed them in place, burned their attacked in the middle of the winter, burned their longhouses and their food, and left them to starve. But do we define them or us not for their sins, but for the sins of their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents? If I were to rewrite our land acknowledgement, I would say something like this. We meet as a free and pluralistic church where each person has a voice and the right to be heard. We gain this right by the grace of the people who walked this land before the Europeans came and whose descendants now struggle to have their own voices heard. We pledge to help them we pledge them our friendship and to support them in their quest for justice. No blame, but a lot of commitment. I would kind of commit us to working with them to bring about justice, though. My point is, if we can learn to engage with one group that's different from ourselves without blame, and then we can engage with the next group who's different from us without blame, and learn to do that as a habit, then we might find that the more groups we engage, the closer we come to realizing Mitch Lee's ultimate dream, living nicely and without cynicism. Now, we have one more hymn coming, and I suspect most of you were hoping for more hope on the Trump front than I offered. So the best hope I have to offer on the Trump front comes from the Filipina journalist Maria Ressa, who was sentenced to 34 years in prison for committing journalism under the Duterte regime. As she points out, since then, she's won a Nobel Peace Prize. Duterte has gone to prison. And her advice to Americans looking for hope is, look to the Philippines. So we're going to sing a Philippine hymn.
Joyful Universalists, come celebrate this company. Official members all unite, rejoicing in debate that's free. To teach the universal light, to strengthen our democracy. To teach the hope that is for all, proclaim the universal call. To teach the hope
Please remain standing as we say together our words for extinguishing our chalice. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love.
You may possess only a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. So be it.
Our postlude is a hymn that you all are free to join in with. It's in the Teal hymnal, number 1021, Lean on Me.
Somebody